It was just past midnight in downtown Los Angeles. The streets were slick from a surprise drizzle, the city lights reflecting off the wet asphalt like spilled paint from a cosmic palette. Most of the world had gone to sleep, but Will Smith hadn't. He couldn't. Wrapped in a hoodie and cap, he sat slouched in the back of a modest black Prius, silent, staring out the window. He had left a late-night charity event hours ago, but something inside had pulled him away from the glamour and applause. Something heavier, something unresolved. The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a voice that had clearly seen better days, hadn't recognized him at first. That was the beauty of the night. Shadows blurred the lines between the famous and the forgotten. "Where to?" the driver had asked, glancing at him through the mirror. Will shrugged. "Just drive." And so they did. For miles. For a long stretch, neither said a word. Only the quiet hum of tires on wet pavement filled the silence. Will's mind spun in 100 directions. Fame, legacy, regrets, the weight of expectation. But then, just when the silence felt like it might crush the cabin, the driver spoke again. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel. Will blinked. "What do you mean?" The driver chuckled. "I mean, just hitting reset, like a video game. New life, new choices, leaving the old behind." Will looked up. Their eyes met in the mirror. "I think about it more than I should," he said softly. And that's when the conversation began. Unexpected, unscripted, real. It started with questions, then confessions. The driver, whose name was Miguel, had once been a music teacher. A good one, too. Had a daughter he barely saw, had dreams that died slow, had nights when he felt like he didn't exist. And Will? Will started talking, too, about the days when laughter came easy and applause felt like oxygen, about the loneliness that crept in when the world thought he had it all, about one night long ago when he'd almost walked away from everything. The ride stretched on. The city faded into the background. Miguel pulled into a quiet overlook above the glowing grid of Los Angeles. They sat there in silence, both men wrapped in a strange shared understanding. Two strangers with different worlds and the same ache in their bones. And then Miguel said something that stayed with Will. "You know what I miss the most?" he asked. "Being seen, not by fans, not by cameras, just seen. As a person." Will didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence between them said enough. That night, Will Smith didn't take a taxi ride. He took a journey into someone else's life, and in the process began to reclaim his own. The next morning, sunlight cut through the city haze warm and golden, as if trying to make up for the weight of the night before. Will Smith sat alone on his balcony, coffee cooling in his hands, heart still tethered to the quiet honesty of that midnight ride. He couldn't shake Miguel's words. Being seen, not by fans, not by cameras, just seen. There was something raw about it, something that pierced through the noise of fame and left him human. It had been years since someone had spoken to him like that. Not Will the icon, Will the man. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a long while. Then he opened a rideshare app, scrolled through the trip history until he found the name. Miguel R., no contact button, no profile picture, just a timestamp and a receipt. He sighed. Maybe that was the end of it. Just a chance encounter floating in the ocean of forgotten nights. But something in him wouldn't let it go. Later that afternoon, Will called in a favor. Not the celebrity kind, just a quiet request to a friend who knew a guy who worked in the city's transportation network. Discreet, low profile. It took a few hours, but by sundown he had an address. A small, sun-faded apartment complex on the east side of the city. Worn bricks, crooked mailboxes, kids riding bikes in the parking lot. Normal, real, the kind of place fame rarely visits. Will stood at the door for a long time, debating whether to knock. He didn't want to seem like he was swooping in with good intentions and Hollywood promises. That wasn't what this was. He just wanted to talk again. Maybe offer something, anything. He knocked twice. A young girl opened the door, a teenager, maybe 13. Her eyes were curious, guarded. Behind her, the faint sound of jazz piano drifted from the living room. "Hi," Will said, offering a soft smile. "Is Miguel here?" The girl squinted. "You're Will Smith?" He chuckled. "Yeah, I get that sometimes." She blinked, then called out, "Dad, there's a Fresh Prince at the door." Footsteps. Then Miguel appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel, clearly stunned. "Man, you really showed up." Will nodded. Didn't feel right leaving it there. They sat on the front steps. The conversation came easier this time. Miguel wasn't playing the role of the quiet driver. Will wasn't playing the role of the grateful passenger. They were just two men again, talking about life, about regrets, about the echo of old dreams. Eventually, the conversation turned to music. Miguel used to play jazz. Taught it, lived it. But somewhere between divorce, bills, and fatigue, the notes got quieter. The piano sat in the living room now, mostly untouched, except when his daughter Elena messed around on it. "Sometimes," he said, "I still play in my head, But the keys, they feel like ghosts. Will looked at him. What if they didn't have to? Miguel furrowed his brow. What do you mean? I know people, Will said. Studios, programs, mentorships. Maybe Elena wants to play. Maybe you want to teach again. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a shot. A real one. Miguel didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered almost to himself. Second chances sound like fairy tales. Will smiled. Maybe. But sometimes fairy tales need drivers. They laughed, and something softened between them. By the time Will left that evening, he didn't feel like a star visiting a stranger. He felt like a man returning to a part of himself he thought he'd lost. A part that listened. A part that saw. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside both men had, and that was enough. For now. Weeks passed. The city moved as it always did. Fast, impatient, full of noise and distraction. But somewhere in the quiet corners of East LA, a melody began to rise again. The sound came from a second-floor apartment, where Miguel's daughter, Elena, practiced scales on an old upright piano that had seen better days. It had a chipped key and a slight rattle in the pedals, but it was alive again. And so was Miguel. The first time he played in front of someone again, it wasn't in a fancy concert hall. It was at the local community center, in a room with plastic chairs and flickering overhead lights. Will had helped pull some strings, got the space donated, printed flyers, brought a few friends. But he stayed in the back, out of sight. Because this wasn't about him. It was Miguel's moment. And as he played, slow, soulful, full of aching beauty, people began to listen. Not just to the music, but to the man behind it. The story of a life paused, and now finally unpaused. Will watched as Elena sat by her father, following every note like it was sacred. She didn't understand all the history behind it yet. But she would. One day, she'd know her father didn't just play piano. He returned to it, with courage. After the small concert, Miguel found Will by the door. The two men didn't say much, just a nod, a smile, a handshake that lasted a second longer than expected. You saved me, Miguel said quietly. Will shook his head. Nah, man, you just needed someone to remind you that you still mattered. Before Will could leave, Elena ran up to him, cheeks flushed with excitement. Hey, Mr. Smith! He crouched to her level, smiling. What's up, future superstar? She handed him a folded piece of notebook paper. I wrote you something. Will opened it as he walked back to his car. It was a hand-drawn sketch of a piano, with a taxicab underneath it. At the bottom, in big, uneven letters, it read, Thank you for hearing the music when no one else could. He sat in his car, holding the note like it was made of glass. It wasn't the kind of scene the world would tweet about. There were no flashing cameras, no viral clips, no trending hashtags. But in that quiet moment, Will Smith felt something he hadn't felt in years. Realness, purpose, peace. He looked out at the city, its case, its stories, its anonymous heroes, and thought, maybe that's the real job. Listening, showing up. Not to be seen, but to see, and with the engine humming beneath him, he drove off into the night. Not as a star, not as a legend, just as a man who got in the right cab at exactly the right time. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest connection can change a life. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional, cinematic, true-to-life stories with a twist of inspiration. Thanks for watching. Stay kind, stay human.